Previously on the Scout Method podcast. So, listen, there is value in going out to play or carving out time to play as an adult, right? So, what do I mean by play, though, right? So, by play, I mean doing something recreationally that gives you joy or brings excitement to your life, right? Brings or makes you excited. That ultimately, though, is, and here's the catch, that's good for you and it's not self-defeating, right? So, because there are a whole bunch of things that you could do recreationally that probably gets you excited or that you would consider fun that's not quite as good for you. So I ain't talking about any of those things. A sound mind actually drives our emotions. It is a discerning mind that is rational in its perception, its comprehension, its judgment, and its decision making. But here's the tough part. The tough part is none of us are born with a sound mind. A sound mind is something that we have to actually work to develop. All right, there's that word work again. We have to work to develop a sound mind. And it's unfortunate because, again, when we're looking at modern times, it seems like in modern times, people are less concerned with working to achieve a sound mind than they are with simply feeling good and feeling good about themselves and making it all about them. But those are some tips that you can take, that you can use to develop your critical thinking skills, okay? Let me wrap them off again, right? We got active listening, researching, observing. Those three help you build your skills in collecting information. Again, and collecting information is simply like either you're looking at it through data, through your eyes, you're listening to it, you're hearing it in podcasts, you're listening to the Scout Method, or you're talking to people. You're talking to professors, you're talking to your neighbors, you're talking to people, right? Side note, that's another reason why we're lacking in the critical thinking skills, because no one talks to anybody anymore. And social media doesn't count, right? Because social media doesn't count because people actually don't say what they really mean on social media. It's like they say what they think they want to mean. so beef up those skills to get better at collecting information. Now you also got to get better at analyzing information. So you have to have self-awareness. You have to be inquisitive, and you have to have good judgment, better evaluation skills, right? And all of those allow you to disseminate the information, break down the data that you collected, throw out the stuff that's false, throw out the stuff that doesn't lead you to a proper conclusion on whatever it is that you're trying to, conclude or decide on, and then draw rational, logical, truthful conclusions on the data that you collected. That's critical thinking. All right, what's up, everybody? Listen, last episode we went over a sound mind, what it is, how do you train to get it, and we also talked about different play modalities or whatever. So like playing like a kid for an adult, right? And how that's beneficial, why adults should do it, why adults should carve out, schedule some time to actually do something fun. It's great for your mental health, great for your overall physical health, so on and so forth. But I really wanted to kind of add a little bit more to the random topic that wasn't as random for this, for the last episode. It's dealing with what I call the critical thinking crisis. And it's funny, after I've recorded that episode, everywhere, and maybe it's just like confirmation bias, but everywhere I looked, there was just some situation in which it showed the complete lack of critical thinking going on around. And it's just, one of the main points that I discussed then was to ask questions, right? A person who doesn't ask questions typically are pretty either they're one of the either extremes, right? They're either super stubborn and not unable to change, basically, or they're the exact opposite, where they change for everything and anything, and they will believe anything and everything. So the critical thinking keeps everything kind of level for you, right? And one of the biggest points that I thought about, and is actually so my wife and I, we homeschool our children, and one of the biggest deserts, I guess, of critical thinking is within the schools. But it wasn't always that way, right? Like at one point, I thought maybe even when I was coming up in school, they would teach you how to think. They would teach you how to think critically. I'm not so sure they do that in these schools now. I mean, as far as what I hear from other parents and as far as what I've experienced myself, it doesn't seem like that's a thing in schools. Now, for the reasons why that would be, that's up for debate, right? But I definitely see a lack of critical thinking within the school system, which is a shame, because then by the time they get to, let's just say, like, they're out of the elementary school system, and they go to high school, and they get out of high school, and they go to college, and that's where they're really supposed to form, at least the foundations for what their adult life is going to be. And half of them don't know how to think. They know how to do. There are a lot of great technical programs, right? Like if, for instance, I came up in finance. So, sure, they'll tell you about debits and credits and things like that. They'll tell you about investments and stocks and bonds and mutual funds and all that fun stuff. They'll tell you about money management. That's all fine and dandy. But there's still a lack of, hey, here's how you determine whether something that's being told to you is true. So that almost, and I know it's a cliche phrase at this point, but they're just like, they'll tell you what to think, but not really tell you how to think. So now you have these adults who have gone through the entire school system, and they're just like, and they don't know how to think. And those typically are people who are easier to manipulate, just with, hey, look, just put a story on the news, and they believe everything that the news says is true. So I don't want to go too far. It's just something that I've noticed, something that I've observed, right? And that's also part of your critical thinking too. And that's not to say that I'm absolutely correct in my assessment, but with the more data that I gather on this particular topic, it does seem that there is a lack of critical thinking from, childhood entering into early adulthood. So I would hope that would change some way, somehow. And a side note, shout out to all my homeschooling parents out there, right? I see that there's a lot more homeschool dads out there. Give y'all props, right? Let's go. But we're in episode 11. Episode 11 is the secret supplement. All right. So for our quick tip, we're going to talk about resistance training. And it's a really simple quick tip, something that I thought I went over before. And I'm actually kind of shocked that, one, I didn't. And two, I'm kind of shocked that I have to still. But, nonetheless, we're going to go over resistance training. What is it? Why do you want to do it? And the benefits that you get from resistance training thereof. For our main topic, we're going to talk about the secret supplement. It's actually the most studied supplement we have. It's creatine. All right. There are so many benefits, and more benefits coming out in these last few months, dealing with various things, and I'll dig into it. But creatine is a pretty decent supplement. It's funny how you kind of watch the trajectory of, when creatine first was, starting to come out and everything like that. It was assumed to be like a steroid. But I have a funny story with that one too. But and then for the random topic, it's it kind of dovetails into a little bit what the idea of having a sound mind and having a sound heart. And this is one of those components that could potentially be a roadblock for you to achieve both, right? So you want to make sure that you, and it's going to sound, kind of maybe simple, but you want to make sure that you forgive. Right? So we're going to talk about forgiveness in our random topic for today. What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well out there. Listen, I'm Coach Evan. This is Say Cheese and Live Studio, and you're listening to the Scowl Method Podcast, your one-stop shop for not only physical fitness, but mental fitness, emotional fitness, and spiritual fitness. Oh, let's get this one going. Here we go. So listen, quick tip, start a resistance training program today, right now, or tomorrow. But no, start it right away. I thought this was common knowledge, as I said before. I thought this was, well known already, but I'm seeing more and more information kind of come out that says, oh, you could obviously be fine without a resistance training program, but I don't understand in my mind how that's not the go-to for all of the goals, right? Like if you wanted to lose weight, you would start a resistance training program, right? But for some reason, the go-to is I'm just going to start jogging, and that for losing weight, no, that doesn't work, right? Jog because you want better heart health. Jog because you enjoy it, but don't jog to lose weight. That's not the most effective way. Let's just put it that way, right? And it's also not the most effective way to keep it off in terms of the weight. So there's just even if you're health conscious, especially if you're health conscious, if you're really, really concerned about your health and well-being, start a resistance training program. And even if you're not, and you just want a decent quality of life, start a resistance training program, right? It's the basis, it's the foundation for so many other things. So it kind of baffles me a little bit that there aren't more people who will resort to upfront a resistance training program. And there's reasons for that. I kind of understand some of them, right? Where weights and things like that can seem to be intimidating. I understand that. But there's also a little bit of so then because they seem to be intimidating, you're going to stay far and away from it, not going to challenge yourself and just hit the trail running. So, and again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with running. What I'm saying is, in order to reach any of your health and wellness goals, the base should be some form of resistance training. So what is resistance training here? So what do I mean by resistance training, right? So put simply, I mean a form of exercise in which the participant, the person, I was going to say a client, but a form of exercise where the participant contracts their muscles against an external object, right? And the two modes of force, or the two main forces really that you work with when you deal with resistance training, gravity and friction. And a lot of the exercises contain both. But that those are the so and maybe I didn't put that as simply as I could have, but essentially you're contracting your muscles in order to lift an object or to move an object, okay? And to keep it pretty simple, I tend to separate the groups, or resistance training as a whole, I tend to separate it out into 4 distinct groups. And that's simply by equipment type, right? So you have all the bells, right? Dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells. So that style of training, where typically you would lead to heavier weights. You also have machine training, and this covers a lot of different avenues. So like I would put a sled under a machine training, like especially like something like a tank, where it gives you a little bit of gravity-based stuff, but a lot of friction-based stuff. So I would also then separate out a group of body weight training, because that's, you're basically going against gravity in most of those cases. For instance, pull-ups, right? You're pulling up, resistance, gravity's pulling you down, and you're pulling up, right? So you have the body weight training, and then I'll probably say bands. Bands would probably be the last group. So you have all the bells, you have machines, you have bands, and you have body weight. And those are the four categories I typically separate out. Resistance training. So what are the benefits to resistance training? First and foremost, and this is number one here, especially for me on my list, right? It increases lean muscle mass, also increasing muscular strength, okay? There are so many things that come from just those two, all right? So let's stick with the increasing lean muscle mass. If you increase your lean muscle mass, first and foremost, you're increasing your metabolism, basically, but you're making your metabolism work more efficiently and work better, especially if you're talking about fat loss, not just simple weight loss, right? And this is where what I alluded to earlier, where it's just like, okay, jogging, that's great, that's all fine and dandy, but you're more likely to lose a good deal of muscle, lean muscle tissue, which is what makes jogging, in terms of using running for weight loss or using cardio for weight loss, not the most effective option. It might be effective short term, up front, but it's not the most effective long term, because while you're losing fat, you're also losing lean muscle tissue. And your lean muscle tissue is what burns the fat, right? You need that. Muscle is super important. And the thing about it is, I guess the sucky part about it is, as you get older, you're not necessarily just gifted more of it, right? So it becomes a little bit more difficult to maintain, but it's absolutely well within a realm of our ability to maintain lean muscle mass as we age, right? But it's important to do so, right? Because, so like I said, increasing lean muscle tissue improves metabolic health. It also improves joint stability, right? So because we're tightening up all the muscles and the tendons around all of our joints, it's less likely for us to have any major joint injury or joint pain. Now, that's also kind of like on a sliding scale a little bit, right? That's not to say that you won't have any pain at all whatsoever, but it's just your ability to deal with the pain will probably be a little bit better. And also, what that lean muscle tissue, the increase in lean muscle tissue is also better for your heart. It's I already said it's better metabolically. It lowers your chances of basically all case mortality, especially again as you age. And this is just, it's still a crazy stat to me, but it's just like one of the leading causes of death when it comes to our aging population is like falls and stuff like that. And I'm just like, oh, that's still, I mean, it was definitely that way 5 years ago. I'm still kind of shocked to see that. I guess I'm just, this whole thing is just, I'm a little shocked, or a little, put aback, right? Because it's just like, there's so much literature out there on the benefits of resistance training. There's so much literature, so many studies. There's a lot of information out there that kind of proves itself, right? So you have one study that says one thing, and then you have another study that pretty much confirms that thing, and then confirms something else. And it's just like, just a lot of information out there. And I just don't like, if you're getting up there in years, I urge you to start a resistance training program. I mean, maybe this is a public service announcement here. Like if you're hitting past your 50s and you're starting to get 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, I don't care how old you are. Once you pass a certain point, right? We're just like some people would say it's like, hey, 45, it all starts going downhill. Well, I don't want to think about that yet. But once you hit that point, like you absolutely should make a priority a resistance training program of some sort. So let me get back into the benefits, right? So while you increase lean muscle tissue, you also increase muscular strength, which is really good for posture, really good for moving better, again, good for your joint stability. All of that stuff really comes along with a decent resistance training program, right? So it's like you not only, look better, right? Look better is still a thing, right? But you also feel better, like, and you're actually internally, better. There's better blood markers, right? At that point for people who do resistance training compared to people who do not, right? So, but then you also move better, right? So resistance training leads to a better quality of life. And there's all these other additional benefits of resistance training, like better, it has cognitive effects. So it has effects on your brain. It makes you feel good because your body releases endorphins. Again, I keep going back to these endorphins, but exercise makes you release endorphins. It makes you feel good. You might not feel great during, but in general, you have this general sense of well-being overall. What else does it do? It does so many different things. It improves athletic performance. It helps your body operate better and more efficiently. So there are any reasons. Like I cannot think of any reason why one wouldn't do resistance training. Like even people who are in some way handicapped, they should still do resistance training as well. Like everybody, I don't care who you are, I don't care where you come from, you should be resistance training in some way, shape, or form. I mean, the list goes on. It improves blood glucose levels. It improves your cognitive abilities. It improves overall. Well, so it decreases inflammation, and it improves your chances or decreases the chances of getting chronic disease because of said inflammation or because of other means, right? Like there are so many reasons. I can go on all day with this. But the point is, there are numerous benefits to starting a resistance training program or to continuing on with a resistance training program. Now, what does one look like? Because like a resistance training program, in a lot of cases, to a lot of people, it's just, hey, look, I got to go out there and start lifting some weights. And that can be a part of it, but there are body weight resistance programs that you could jump into. I mean, I've seen they're plastered all over the place. They're like 10-minute body weight only workout. Yeah, try it. Right? Or you could do things like Pilates, which is really, I love Pilates. It's just one of those things where it's just really good, because what another benefit that I didn't mention to resistance training, it actually improves your flexibility. And none of them do it better than Pilates does. But because it also improves flexibility, but it improves your strength in those, somewhat hypermobile positions, right? Even things like bar. Bar is really good. Now, granted, I've done maybe 2 bar classes before, and you talk about. You talk about somebody sweating I was sweating so much I was almost embarrassed, because I was just like, yo, ain't no way I'm sitting there with a little bar attached to the wall and you got me doing all these ballerina poses and everything like that, and I'm sweating my behind off like this. But it's also like, it's just a really good. It does strengthen you up. And it does help in the sense that that's a really decent you're just using your body for the most part, but you're using gravity and you're going against gravity. So it's like one of the better body weight resistance training exercises, right? But you can also go, like I said, you can go to all the bells, right? And you could do, dumbbells, kettlebells, barbells. That's where I pretty much make my home, right? But there's also machines, various machines, because that's where I would put a lot of the isometric machines in there too, right? The isometric and the isokinetic machines, those will be thrown in that group too, right? But then you also have like the simple machines, like a lat pull down machine or something like that, where you're, cable machines and plate loaded machines. There are a whole bunch of different options, but if you wanted to start somewhere, start off with body weight. And honestly, for a lot of people, that's sufficient. That'll be sufficient for a while. And if you can't start with body weight, because there's a group of people who can't start with body weight, start with chair. Right? You're sitting down doing chair exercises, but something you have to do something here, okay? Because it's. I mean, if you're really, like I said, I separated it out to two groups here. If you're into your health and your wellness, it's basically the key to unlock almost everything. So I almost want to, and I don't like these broad stroking statements or anything like that, but I find it very difficult to believe that one is very interested in their own health and wellness and they're not on a resistance training program of some sort, right? And it doesn't always. I also think that's part of the kind of the wall that a lot of people put up a little bit, because they assume that a resistance training program is only with the bells, right? It's only with the weights and only what you see in the gyms. But no, like it's broad ranging, right? And for instance, when we were all locked in the house with COVID, what's the first thing that sold out? Resistance bands, right? And I kind of say, rightfully so, because you can get some decent workouts with resistance bands as well. So there are a number of different avenues you could go to get your resistance training on. And it doesn't just have to be some heavy dumbbells or heavy barbells or, doing like powerlifting. That is not the only route. There are a number of different routes. And I want you to keep that in mind, because I'm absolutely urging you to start a resistance training program. It's almost like this is more than a quick tip. This is like a mandate. Like, go start a resistance training program today. This is what leads to longevity for you. This is what leads to better health outcomes for you, especially if you are a person who is into your health and your wellness. You're into health and wellness. There is no way that you should have everything else set aside and you don't have a resistance training program set aside for yourself. Okay? All right. That was a quick tip. Let's keep it pushing. All right, so let's talk about this secret supplement that's not so secret. Let's talk about some creatine. Creatine, I think, is the most studied supplement we have out there right now, right? There are a gazillion, and I do mean this as a technical term, gazillion studies done on creatine, its benefits, its side effects potentially, what happens if you overdose on it, all of this stuff. So it's been tested. It's been put through the ringer, so to speak, right? But I'll never forget. So creatine's been out for, as a supplement, it's been out for a long time, right? But it was funny because, like, I remember in my track running days, back way back when I was a sprinter, right? So, and there would be guys on the team who would, drink their protein. That was actually the first time I got with any protein shake as well. So, but it was like they would drink their protein shakes and then they would drink their creatine before track meet, before practice. And listen, let me tell you, the creatine back then definitely wasn't this easily mixable stuff that we have now. I mean, creatine back then was like gravel. Ooh, that stuff it would get gritty. Ooh, it would get gritty. It did not mix well back then. But anyway, I remember when I was in the middle of track season, and one of the guys, he had creatine or whatever, and it was just it felt like it was such a such a sidebar thing. Like, we knew about different supplements and things like that, like protein, and again, like I said, I just started drinking protein shakes around that time. And so this one guy, he was just like, he had some creatine, and he was just like, yeah, man, I got the creatine. And all of us, we just looked at a couple, this was like 3 other guys on the track team. We were just looking at him like, why are you doing that, right? And then I remember talking to my dad about it back then, and he was just like, I was like, hey, yeah, I was going to the supplement store to get some protein powder, and then and I didn't say anything about the creatine then. And I remember my dad was just like, well, yeah, the protein powder is cool, but watch out for that creatine. And the way everybody spoke of creatine back then, it was as if it was a steroid, right? And I think that was, I don't remember if that was an official like myth that was out, like creatine was a steroid of some sort. It sounds very familiar, but I'll never forget my dad giving me all the rundown and just like, hey, you better be careful with that stuff. It was like a like creatine was like this dangerous drug that was changing people and making them angry and everything like that. Yeah, so the I guess the perception of creatine has come a pretty far way from being potentially a steroid to being probably one of the best supplements to exist, right? Like, it's one of those things. It has just so many benefits. Now, there's as with anything good, as with any supplement, you have to kind of do these things in moderation. There's a certain amount that you should take, and you shouldn't overdo it because it could cause issues. Like anything that's good, it could be bad if overdone. So what is it then, right? What is creatine? If it's not a steroid, which it is not, what is it? So creatine is it's a naturally occurring substance. It's found in meat. It's found in fish. And what it does is once it's converted, so let me backtrack. It's found in meat and fish in varying degrees, right? So it's not, I think probably ground beef has the most, possibly. I'll have to double check that actually. But it's found in meat and fish in varying degrees. And what you also produce it yourself too. You produce it in your liver, you produce it in your kidneys and your pancreas, I believe. So you produce it, a little bit of it yourself. You get it from meats and fish. And what it does is it's converted and then stored in your muscles as energy, right? So it's similar to carbs, where carbs breaks down into glycogen, and then the glycogen is stored in your muscles for energy. So this kind of energy, though, is for like rapid release, is ready, set, go type of energy. So this is what you're going to burn off first, right? Which is why creatine supplementation, one of the benefits of creatine supplementation is it gives you that energy for and let me be specific in terms of the kind of energy it is. It's not like caffeinated energy, right? It's not like it just feels different, right? But this is the type of energy that you get for intense exercise. So whether that be HIIT or like heavy lifting or like power, explosive, Olympic lifting, something like that. Creatine gives you energy to be able to, dispose of or to use during those types of exercises or during those types of workouts. So there are a lot of studies that have been done on the benefits of creatine and as it pertains to muscle mass, right? So creatine can help you increase lean muscle, increase muscle strength, better performance during like HIIT exercises, HIIT workouts, increase endurance. I mean, there's a lot of things that it does to your muscles, but the most recent studies that I've seen actually have pointed out there are a lot of cognitive benefits. There are a lot of benefits to your brain. So apparently, creatine can make you sharper, more focused, have more clarity, which, that's not at all what I was thinking about when I was, taking it all those years ago when I was running track. But apparently, creatine can help with that. So earlier, when I listed off all of those benefits to just resistance training alone, coincidentally, all of those benefits that you would gain from just starting a resistance training program, you also get from creatine supplementation. So which is also why I say, and this is part of the myth that's going on too. I wouldn't say always, but I typically suggest creatine supplementation for females, and specifically for one thing where it comes to osteoporosis. So if you have, think of the chain of events here, right? You start a resistance training program, and you want to be able to endure more, last more, lift more, whatever, right? So, but you need the energy for that. So then you start creatine supplementation, all the while strengthening up your muscles and all that fun stuff. Now remember, resistance training by itself increases or improves bone density and bone health up front. So now you combine that with creatine supplementation, and you have an amplified effect, so to speak, right? So, creatine supplementation is not bad for females. In fact, I would urge females to do creatine supplementation just like everybody else, because the benefits are so far reaching. Now, here are some benefits that you might not necessarily think about. And actually, I had to, do my normal thing, write them all down and text them all out and all that fun stuff. But here's the ones that we don't really talk about as much, right? We talk about how creatine affects the muscles, and we talk about how creatine affects the bones, but we don't typically talk about, just in general, the hydration improvement, right? Hydration improvement. So when you supplement with creatine, it helps your cells retain water, which ultimately keeps your muscles hydrated, right? Muscles hydrated, a hydrated muscle will always operate better than a dehydrated muscle, obviously, right? But that also just helps with your total overall health, right? So therefore, it also gives you support for exercising in the heat. So it's surprise, surprise. I would actually suggest creatine supplementation for my joggers out there. Again, I would say go on a resistance training program. But if jogging is something that you like to do and you end up doing jogging and running somewhere and it's hot outside, it wouldn't be a bad idea for you to supplement with some creatine beforehand. Okay. It also, according to a couple studies, has antioxidant properties. Now, I didn't know this before actually, digging into it a little bit more. But there's some studies that suggest that it can have an antioxidant effect on your body. Pretty cool, right? And creatine also serves as when it comes down to which energy source is used first. So remember what I said, it's converted and broken down into energy and stored in the muscles. The same way, not the same way, but the same thing happens with carbs. Carbohydrate breaks down into glycogen, and glycogen is stored in your muscles and also in your liver and all that fun stuff, but it's stored in your muscles. So what happens is creatine, when it's broken down, typically is preferred to be used as that quick release energy before you go into glycogen. So that's where, in a lot of cases, people will say creatine is muscle sparing, meaning you have a boatload of energy to burn through before your body starts to become catabolic and break down the muscle tissues and break down protein a little bit more to convert it into energy, right? So it seems like what creatine does, and this is according to a few studies, what creatine could do is be the first in line in terms of energy to be used, spare your glycogen, therefore, coming or staying further away from, entering into a catabolic state, meaning you're going to spare your muscles here, spare the muscle tissue. That won't be bothered at all. So I think that's a very, very interesting spot. It's almost like an enhancement, right? It enhances the glycogen or improves glycogen use, right? So it also can, creatine can aid in your recovery after the fact. So after a workout, it can, you might not be as sore. It might jumpstart muscle repair because what it does is it enhances satellite cell activity. So whenever you do resistance training, there at times it doesn't always have to be, but there are times where you have some small micro tears in the muscle. Well, the satellite cells are the cells that go out to repair each of those muscle fibers, right? And eventually, build up to building more muscle, right? So creatine can enhance satellite cell activity, which makes it, again, it's no wonder this thing can do so, like this tiny little supplement can do so much, and it was thought to be a steroid before. I'm just like, it's funny to me. It's funny to me. But I mean, of course, it also it gives you better blood sugar control, support your heart health, and it improves your anaerobic capacity, which means you just increases your endurance, right? And one other benefit to creatine supplementation, and this is the, maybe not the biggest one, but it's affordable. Creatine is kind of cheap, right? It's cheap to make. It's cheap to get in bulk, right? So that's a pretty big, because I mean, when compared to other supplements that you're paying like hundreds and hundreds of dollars for, I mean, you can get a good deal of creatine for not that much money, right? So how do I suggest that you use creatine? I'll give you an example of what I do for myself. First of all, I don't load creatine, right? That's something that we had to do back in the day. But I mean, if you're talking about creatine monohydrate, you just start taking it. Just start taking it straight up. There's no creatine loading, segment or whatever. And I think for the most part, I take maybe like 5 grams a day. And it's just one little scoop and boom. You could start anywhere from 1 to 5 grams a day. I would err on the side of, starting with 1, right? And you keep moving from there, right? Again, I do it every day, specifically before my workouts on my workout days, and any other time I just kind of have it in my drink with dinner or something like that. But oh no, actually I'm lying. I do it in the morning, so I kind of start my day with it a little bit. Now, please keep in mind when I say start off with 1 gram of creatine a day, that it's not really. Like, I'm basically erring on the side of extreme caution here, right? Because there are people who, and there are studies that show this as well. So, I'm not just saying that they're going rogue and just doing their own thing. Although I believe there are people who do that. I'm not talking about them in this instance, right? But there are people who do like a loading phase in which they take 20 grams of creatine a day for a week or so, or for 2 weeks or something like that. And then they go down to a maintenance phase, and that's just so that we can load up all the creatine in your muscles and all that fun jazz and go from there. I don't think that's necessary with creatine monohydrate right now. So you would be okay with just hitting the maintenance phase, which would be 3 to 5 grams of I'm sorry, not protein, 3 to 5 grams of creatine a day. For athletes or bodybuilders, I would probably aim for closer to 10 grams of creatine a day. Split out though, right? So it can cause a whole bunch of stomach issues and things like that, and bloating and all that fun jazz if you take too much at one time. So just to again, I much rather would err on the side of extreme caution here and just say, hey, let's just split it up over the course of the day, as opposed to just taking it all in one shot. Right now, that might not be easily done for a lot of people, but I mean, you're drinking it, so you should be fine, right? You should be able to knock that out. But so extremely cautious, 1 gram of creatine a day. Normal, 3 to 5 grams a day. Athlete, bodybuilder, up to 10, split out over the course of the day, a day. Okay, and those are just general guidelines. Because different people are going to use these supplements different ways. But like I said, I err on the side of extreme caution. So for me, myself, I go 4 or 5 grams a day. So I'm constantly in maintenance mode no matter what. Unless, and there is one caveat. If I'm really making a push to gain some lean muscle, then I will probably aim at that 10-gram mark. It just depends on what my goals are at that point in time. But for general health, general working out, and especially if you're a person that has never ever done taken creatine before, start off with the one, just to kind of get used to the idea, right? It's not going to make a big difference quite yet. And then go for that 3 to 5 every day. That's when you're really going to start to see or feel, or both, some differences. Okay. And so that's my advice on the creatine. That's the secret supplement, right? There's so many studies. I mean, look, you take a few minutes, just Google it. You'll see a plethora of different studies and people talking about it, this, that, and the third, like doctors, everybody. It's well researched, well studied. So in combination with the quick tip, start creatine supplementation today as well. Unless you have any, outstanding issues, other issues that would prevent you from doing it. Of course, consult your physician about any supplementation, because that stuff isn't, tracked by the FDA, so on and so forth. And that's a different topic. But just make sure that you check all the boxes, dot your I's, cross your T's, and then and start a resistance training program and creatine supplementation, and watch the changes happen. All right, so let's talk about forgiveness. And this one's a little bit of a sticky subject here, because there are a lot of misconceptions on what forgiveness is, and how to actually forgive in general, right? So forgiveness, in a loose definition, is the act of letting go feelings of resentment or vengeance, right, against someone who has harmed you, or from a biblical perspective, who has sinned against you, right? So you're basically letting it go. You're pardoning them, whoever that person may be, or whoever that group of people may be, right? Even if it's yourself, right? And it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting subject. It's an interesting thing to think about. But the reason why I bring this up now as a random topic is because what I just went over what a sound mind is. And it's interesting because a sound mind is also a forgiving mind, right? And that sounds like a weird statement to make, But, because a lot of people believe that, well, you have to forgive them with your heart. And no, you don't. That's not a thing. You don't forgive with your heart, because forgiveness is a decision. It's something that you have to think of, right? Because in your heart, you feel the vengeance, you feel the anger, you feel the anxiety, you feel all the other things, all these other emotions. And remember, you regulate your emotions with your thinking. So the act of forgiveness is a thinking process. It's one that you do with a sound mind. A sound mind is a forgiving mind. And the interesting part about this one, or another interesting part about forgiveness, is in most cases, the person that you're forgiving, or the people that you're forgiving, don't necessarily deserve it, right? So, forgiveness is something that you do. You will pardon them from their wrongdoing or from their sin against you, even though they might not necessarily deserve it, in order for you to move on, right? Now, here's the key, right? You have to, it's like a process that you have to go through, starting with your mind here, right? You have to change your thinking, therefore changing your feelings, and then changing your behaviors, all lining up to basically just letting it go, because ultimately that's better for you as a person, right? So again, I bring this up because having a sound mind and having a sound heart, like a sound mind is a forgiving one, and that ultimately helps you have and achieve a sound heart as well. Because that's one thing, that's one quick way to land in some pretty dark territory. That holding that unforgiveness in your heart, right? Basically making the decision to, or not making the decision to forgive, making the decision to harbor that unforgiveness, and not releasing said people or group of people from any retribution. So what does forgiveness actually help you do? Like, for you, the individual, why are you supposed to forgive? Why, besides the obvious, where it's just like, forgive so that you're forgiven from a biblical perspective, right? So you got to think about it this way, right? Your ability to forgive is likened to your ability to achieve peace, right? Harboring that unforgiveness within yourself is almost like a small little bit of poison to your entire being, right? And I know people who have gone on years with, kind of holding on to different things that have happened, even different things that they've done, right? And let me pause right there for a second, right? You also have to forgive yourself for things, right? And a lot of times our own guilt of different various shortcomings and wrongdoings is that very thing that's taking us out of the game, so to speak. So you have to learn to forgive in a general sense, but also learn to forgive yourself. I know that is a lesson that has come very hard for me. And I'm just being a little transparent here, right? Like, that's a hard lesson for me to learn, or it has been a hard lesson for me to learn, to forgive myself for the wrongdoings that I have done, the things that I've done wrong to others, the terrible positions that I put other people in. That's a journey. That is definitely a journey, but it's a journey that starts with my thinking, right? So you want to be able to forgive yourself, forgive others, and it's a little different, right? Like, when you're forgiving others, you're kind of foregoing, you're letting it go. You're letting it go, not forgetting, right? And I'll get to that in a little bit, but you're letting it go, that retribution or that vengeance, right? It's kind of the same thing with yourself, but typically you're not thinking of, getting retribution on yourself or getting vengeance on yourself, but it's the guilt then that you have to let go of. And so where somebody else, vengeance, retribution. With yourself, guilt, right? Forgiveness allows you to move past all of those things, right? So what are there are quite a few benefits to forgiveness as a whole, right? What are the benefits to forgiving someone, something, some group, right? Well, the first one is it reduces your stress levels, which is funny. There are studies that show that forgiveness can reduce your cortisol levels, and cortisol is basically the stress hormone. Too much of it causes heart attacks and, breaks down muscle tissue and all that fun stuff. Cortisol typically is not that great in abundance, okay? So forgiveness can actually help reduce your cortisol levels, which improves your mental health, right? It improves your mental health in the sense that, well, now you're letting go of the feelings of anxiety, depression, anger, especially anger. You're letting go of that anger, right? And you're moving past it. Those are the things that kind of stress you out. So because of all of those things, lower cortisol and better mental health, you have a better better physical health, right? Because now you're lowering stress, you're improving your mental health, and you have better physical health because of those things. Lower blood pressure, better heart health, things like that. Because another thing, like too much cortisol is damaging to your heart, right? So those are just some of the benefits, just a few. I mean, you can also go into more of a emotional, mental, perspective outside of just the physical stuff that the studies are done on. Like, you'll have better relationships. You might also be able to heal certain relationships with forgiveness, right? So forgiveness is a big benefit to your overall well-being. And again, it helps you march your way towards a sound mind and a sound heart. Now we have to talk about what forgiveness is not. We talked about what it is and we talked about what its benefits are, but what is not forgiveness? Now, first of all, one of the phrase that just drives me crazy is you forgive and forget. There's no such thing. there is no such thing, and it doesn't work that way. And anybody who's actually tried to forgive and forget probably ended up causing themselves more issues, maybe in the immediate future or maybe later on down the line. But that's not forgiveness is not forgetting. In fact, it's the exact opposite here. In order to truly forgive someone, you have to remember. True forgiveness is not achievable without remembrance. And what do I mean by when I say that, though? Like, I mean, you have to, so take it from a Christian perspective. To forgive someone is to release any feelings of vengeance, any feelings of anger, or the desire for retribution for someone or something that has sinned against you. So to forget someone's sin is just like, okay, I'm just going to forget that you did this thing that's a sin against me, right? No, it's not forgetting, because then it's just like, well, then how do you maintain that forgiveness? If you forget that they did it, and let's just say, which happens often, they do it again, well, okay, yeah, no, it is what it is, right? It becomes even harder that second time around to forgive, to let go of those feelings of anger, retribution. You can't do it. You can't do it. Because if they did it to you once, then they do it to you again, you will remember that they did it to you once. It doesn't work. There is no forgive and forget. But to truly forgive, again, you have to remember, right? It's almost like, and again, from a Christian perspective, God forgives us of our sins. That's what Christ died on the cross for. God never said that he forgot our sins. He never, and nowhere does it say that we forget what you did. We not, And there's no one in there that said like, that was under that assumption or that under that presupposition that God forgot. I said no, He forgave, and the act of forgiveness is basically what we offer to God is our repentance. What we get back for repentance is forgiveness. That's how it works. If God didn't remember, what are we doing then? Right? There would have been no point in Him dying on the cross. So that's from a biblical perspective. But even from just a regular, just straight up, like, all right, cool. What are you forgiving? Okay, I'm going to forgive and then I'm going to act like this didn't happen. Come on now. Like, that doesn't work. So forgiveness no. So forgive and remember so that you can continue to forgive. Right? And it doesn't come up as another thing later on. Now, the next thing is just like forgiveness is not making an excuse for the person either, right? Like, again, it's just like you don't want to water down and you don't want to change in any way what the person actually did. And I almost feel like for a lot of people, that's a defense mechanism. Like, oh, it really wasn't that bad. No, I mean, I'm okay. No, it is what it is. I'm gonna forgive him, but it really wasn't that bad, right? That's not forgiveness. That's not forgiveness. Call a spade a spade. Call it what it was, and then make the decision to forgive. Make the decision to let go of any vengeance or retribution. If you have to, and it's almost like, to me, it's kind of a cop-out, where it's just like, hey, look, somebody did something wrong to you, and you're just like, well, it wasn't that bad. Like, what do you mean? Like, it was wrong. If it was wrong and it was done against you, you're almost watering down your own forgiveness by making it seem like it wasn't that bad. And it might not have been. But the thing is like, it is what it is, right? So whether it's extremely egregious or whether it was, just like a petty difference, either way, you don't want to decrease the importance of what it was in order for you to forgive. That's just lowering the bar so that you can jump over it. At least that's the way I see it, right? And it might sound really, really complicated, but you don't want to change in any way what the person did. You don't want to forget what the person did, because that hinders your ability to forgive that person for what they did. And I this one is an interesting one, I guess, right? So like, forgiveness isn't a sign of weakness. And I'm not sure why it would be, but somebody actually told me that before, a long time ago, that no, you, like, if they wronged you, you got to pay them back. And it's a weakness if you forgive them. And they will never learn if you forgive them. And so, it's a very hyper masculine way of looking at it, I think. And I just don't, I don't agree with it at all. I think one of the strongest things that you can possibly do, one of the wisest things that you can possibly do, especially as a Christian, but as just a regular person, is forgive someone. It takes a lot more strength to not, completely lash out and go off on somebody for for something they did wrong. It takes a lot more strength to breathe that out and let it go. At least in my opinion, right? So, forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is not making an excuse for what was done, and forgiveness is for sure not a weakness. Okay? So what do you need to do in order to forgive here, right? Like, what are some steps you can take, right? Well, first and foremost, again, because we're right in the vein of like not acting like it didn't happen, not acting like it wasn't as bad. So what you have to do first for yourself is acknowledge the pain that it caused. Acknowledge what it did to you, whatever it is, right? So there's a point of, this is where the remembrance comes in. In order to actually make the decision to forgive, you have to know what you're working with. Like there has to be something to forgive. So if you're forgetting it already, it doesn't make sense. So you have to acknowledge the pain, acknowledge what happened. Okay, that from there you start to process what happened, right? And there's a number of different things that you can do, but one of the big things that I hear and then I've studied up on, I guess, is to empathize with the person who wronged you. And that's a tough thing. That's a tough thing. I mean, even to make the decision to forgive is tough, but to empathize with that person, to kind of try and think about what they're going through, step into their shoes, and try and figure out a pathway in which they would do that particular thing to someone else, right? Like that's hard. That's hard. But remember, we're going back to a sound heart again. In order to empathize here, you have to have a sound heart, right? You have to have some emotional intelligence here in order to empathize. So this is so the act of forgiveness. So I'm just like pull up a little bit. The act of forgiveness contains so much of what the Scowl method is, right? It's almost integral to it, right? You can't hold grudges. You can't hold grudges and have a sound mind. You can't forgive and not have a sound heart as well, right? It's very interesting, very interesting. So, those are the steps. So you would start off with acknowledging the pain, recognizing what happened. You have to call it out almost, right? One of the steps that you could take is to empathize with that person that wronged you. And so then from that point on, once you kind of have an understanding of what it is, then you have to make the decision to actually forgive them. And that process it's another thing where it's just like you have to actively let go of the resentment. You have to actively let go of that desire for vengeance. You got to let it go and move on. Not just for the person's sake, but absolutely for your sake, right? So, and after that, like, if you're a believer, find your squad, find your group. Support in a lot of these cases, especially when you're dealing with more serious situations, find a support of fellow believers. Find a support of certain family members, whatever it may be. But, gather some people around you to help you through that process, especially with the things that are more serious. So that's forgiveness. Forgiveness in a nutshell, okay? There are other parts to it, but I think that's, as a base, that's a quick guideline for you to how do you actually forgive someone and what it's not. And please stay away from the traps, because the culture will tell you, here we go with the culture again, but the culture will tell you that forgiveness is something completely different. And if that's a trap in and of itself, that will leave you mad, that will leave you anxious, that will leave you depressed, and we don't want any of those things, okay? So what I want to do at this point is I want to encourage you. I want you to examine your life. So here's where we have to think about some things again, right? Again, right on the heels of a sound mind, but you have to analyze your life. Look at those things, look at those moments in which you might have to forgive. I could tell you straight from myself, when I actually started to sit down and think about those things over the course of my life, I realized there were plenty of places where I needed to forgive myself, forgive others. And then I started taking the steps to actively do that. Not all of them are like, I'm not perfect. I'm not squeaky clean here. But I would urge you to examine your life, examine even just like the mundane day to day, right? Examine all of it and find those places where you might be harboring unforgiveness. You might be surprised at what you find. Yeah. So let's that's my advice. Let's keep it pushing here. And of course, you know how to get to me. You know how to get to me. If you need somebody to talk to, I don't even know who you are. If you need somebody to talk to, hit me up. If you have any questions, hit me up. We'll go from there. All right. But that's forgiveness. Do it for your sound mind. Do it for a sound heart. All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Episode 11, knocked out, done. And listen, it's something. So we talked about quite a few things here, right? We talked about the secret supplement, creatine. Start your resistance training program. Again, I'm gonna overemphasize this one. Go out there, start a program. Start a resistance training program. Start it today. Start resistance training. Please. do it for longevity. Do it for your life. Do it for a better quality of life, right? And we also talked about, like I said, we're going back to it, talked about creatine, how it's not such a scary mythological supplement that's, like a steroid. It's nothing like that, right? But it's a highly beneficial supplement, especially if you're active, right? And then we went over this whole idea of forgiveness and what it is. And listen, I'm struck by this one thing. Like I mentioned something earlier in the podcast when talking about forgiveness, that we offer Christ repentance and he offers us forgiveness. And I'm not making this into a Bible study or anything like that, but that I am thoroughly struck by that sentiment, that thought is just, all we have to do is turn away from sin. That's it. We don't have to necessarily pay for, answer to, in a strictest of senses, right? Like all we have to do is turn away, and we're forgiven, right? And it's just, it reminds me a little bit of some folk, some of my fellow Christians out there who will say, who pretty much kind of take advantage of that idea and then assume that it means that they can stay in their sin inevitably. And, last minute, they're going to ask for forgiveness and God is going to forgive them. But the nature of forgiveness is actually, as far as it comes to our relationship with Christ, comes to that repentance. You actually have to turn away from that sin. So it's just a very interesting concept to me. And it's one that I'm probably going to be thinking for a few more hours after I shut this thing down. But let me move on a little bit, right? So, as always, like all the things that we put out there, comment on them. Honestly, if you just went down and shared this with somebody, shared the podcast with somebody, shared the shorts that I have everywhere with somebody, shared the longer form segment videos that are on YouTube, share that with somebody, that would be the biggest help for me. Just share these things, share these ideas, and if I can help in any way, that's really what I'm doing this for, is so that I can help in some way, shape, or form some of you all out there. All right. So in the meantime, I'm Coach Evan. This is Say Cheese and Lift Studio, and you just got finished listening to the Scowl Method Podcast, your one-stop shop for not only physical fitness, but mental fitness, emotional fitness, and spiritual fitness. I'm going to see y'all on the next episode. Hey, forgive, start your programs, and consider creatine.